Okay, to introduce our next speaker, we have a tape, and I think it's going to be self-explanatory, but I'll just point out that Matthew Ogden had a chance to talk to Senator Bob Graham a few days ago. If I could have also Terry, could you come up, and Ray, and we can begin the tape as they are coming to the...
I'm Walter Jones. I represent the 3rd Congressional District of North Carolina in the United States House of Representatives. I'm pleased today to share some thoughts with you. I have joined Stephen Lynch and Thomas Massie. Stephen Lynch is a congressman from Massachusetts, and Thomas Massie from Kentucky, and myself have joined in a letter to President Obama. We write today to urge you to declassify the 28 redacted pages of the joint inquiry into intelligence activities before and after the terrorist attack on September of 2001. How can you have a democracy or a republic and not have sunshine in your government? We had a news conference several months ago, and we brought the families in who have lost loved ones. If the President could just see the pain in the eyes and the words of those family members, then hopefully he would declassify these 28 pages.
Here is a picture of my husband, Tom. He was the love of my life. His parents, siblings, and our 3 children miss him each and every day. He was only 41 years old.
The 28 pages has nothing to do with national security. If it did, I wouldn't be speaking to you today. It does not. It talks about relationships in the international world that we live in, and who we can trust and not trust.
These families and our nation experienced a profound and personal loss. There are many questions that remain, and these families and our nation deserve to have those questions answered. The declassification of the 28 pages is an important step towards answering those questions, and after reviewing the 28 pages, we believe, myself and Walter and Mr. Massie, we believe that they can be declassified without harming U.S. intelligence sources and methods. Indeed, we firmly believe that the information contained therein can be instructive in framing our current anti-terrorism policy going forward. Terrorism remains a real threat to the United States, no doubt. And the better informed we are, the better we will be able to ensure that we are doing everything possible to protect Americans at home and abroad. Again, I want to thank the families for being here. I want to thank them for their strength and their support. And collectively, we respectfully ask the White House to make these 28 pages available to the American public. Thank you.
I want to talk about the experience of sitting down and reading these 28 pages. It's in a room where it's soundproof, and you're escorted in there and you're escorted out, and there are no notes. But this is something that's sort of shocking when you read it. As I read it, and we all had our own experience, I had to stop every couple pages and just sort of absorb and try to rearrange my understanding of history for the past 13 years and the years leading up to that. It challenges you to rethink everything. And so I think the whole country needs to go through that. It's going to be difficult and it could be embarrassing. But that is no reason to keep the truth from the American people.
You have people like Senator Bob Graham, who for years, ever since he's left the Senate, has been calling on the President and all the President and the senators and the House members to declassify these 28 pages.
I want to thank the members of the Congress who are taking the leadership in using the prerogatives and I think obligations that Congress has in our system to demand that the executive release this information. It is important for a number of reasons. It's important for justice. There are thousands of Americans who are currently litigating against countries like Saudi Arabia and other entities for their complicity in 9/11, and therefore their responsibility to accept some of the horrific cost which have befallen those families because of the loss of a loved one. That justice to date has been denied in part because important information that would sustain their claims have been withheld, such as this 28-page chapter. Second, it's important to set the historical record correct. If we are going to not repeat the past, but learn from the past in order to avoid incidents such as 9/11 in the future, we need to know everything we can as truthfully and fully as possible about what actually happened on 9/11 and in the preparation for 9/11. And finally, it's a matter of current national security. If you feel, as I do, that there was a network of support for the 9/11 hijackers, what reason do we have to believe that that network was abandoned immediately after 9/11? What reason do we have to believe that it's not in existence today, ready to be used for a future attack against the United States?
No matter how many airstrikes we launch, drones we use, or troops on the ground we deploy, as long as there are well-funded terrorist organizations that continue to vow to murder and destroy us, we will never be able to stop future terrorist threats. My children and yours live in a world where there are videos posted on social media of ISIS beheading American hostages and declaring they will hang their flag on the White House. How did we get here, and what does our future hold? Part of the narrative of how we got here is in these 28 pages. Who finances the world of terror? Who gave financial and logistic support to the 19 hijackers? That truth has been kept a secret from my family and the American people for 13 long, painful years. We and the American public deserve to know the truth.
I would encourage you today to contact your members of Congress and ask them to look seriously at H. Resolution 428, which was introduced by Congressman Stephen Lynch, Democrat from Massachusetts, Congressman Walter Jones, Republican from the 3rd District of North Carolina, and ask that member of Congress to do what is right for the families of 9/11.
Mr. President, please declassify the 28 pages that hold truths regarding who was behind my father's murder for me and for the other 3,000 children who lost a parent on 9/11. As a father, wouldn't you want your children to not have to live with unanswered questions without ever knowing the truth? I plead you, Mr. President, to declassify the 28 pages for me and the other thousands of 9/11 children for peace and closure of that horrific day.
The families deserve to know what's in the 28 pages, and the American people do as well. There is no democracy, there is no republic without the American people knowing the truth about 9/11. Thank you.
So please join me in welcoming Terry Strada, the National Co-Chair, 9/11 Families United for Justice Against Terrorism.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Boy, it's hard to watch still. I'm living it, and it's still hard to watch it. My name is Terry Strada. I am the National Co-Chair of 9/11 Families United for Justice Against Terrorism. My group consists of over 6,000 victims, family members, and survivors from the tragic terrorist attacks that occurred here in America on September 11, 2001. Like thousands, my husband was brutally murdered on 9/11, just 4 days after we brought home our third child, Justin, who you saw standing with me, and his sister, Caitlin, who spoke at the end. So Justin was 4 days old, Katie was 4 years old, and my son, Thomas, was 7 years old. On September 11th, 2001, it was clear from the beginning what had happened. 4 commercial airplanes were hijacked. Pilots and flight attendants were brutally murdered, and the planes were used as missiles to crash into our landmarks and murder innocent souls. They attacked capitalism by piercing into the World Trade Center, attacked our defense by slamming into the Pentagon, and they were headed for our nation's capital next to kill our government officials. When the smoke cleared and the fires were extinguished, along with the carnage left behind, 3 questions remained. Who attacked us? Why did they attack us? And how were they able to carry out such a complex plan that took years to plan, train, and then implement? Back in 2002, outraged and bereaved 9/11 families united and fought for the truth, which resulted in the 9/11 investigations. Feigning a national security risk, 28 pages of the Joint Congressional Inquiry into intelligence community activities before and after the September 11th attacks by Congress were redacted by President Bush. That information has been withheld from the families, survivors, and the American people to this day. According to the report and those who have read it, as they have just stated in the video, there is no threat to national security to have these pages released. Former Senator Bob Graham, co-chair of that report, has been vigorously and persistently seeking the truth, asking for the declassification of the 28 pages for several years. And on the 10-year anniversary, in a Huffington blog post, he even called for the reopening of the 9/11 investigation. We deserve answers to these questions. How did the 19 hijackers come into our country undetected, live amongst us for nearly 2 years, rent apartments, and buy first-class airline tickets to practice their heinous acts of terrorism? The answer, contrary to what our government has been telling us since 9/11, is that they did not act alone. Before they came to America, there was already in place an intricate web of banks, charities, and wealthy individuals who funneled money, millions of dollars, to nefarious groups, part of which went to the 19 hijackers for the planning and implementation of their plot to kill innocent men, women, and children on American soil. In an attempt to get answers to those questions, we, the victims' family members and survivors, channeled our pain, outrage, and suffering into a quest for not only the truth, but for accountability. In order for justice to be served, we filed a lawsuit in civil court to hold liable those who financed the murder of our loved ones and the injuries of their survivors, supported by evidence produced by our own $20 million investigation. To ensure our safety and reality-based foreign policy going forward, we must know who our enemy is, and that answer has been hidden for over a decade. It is unconscionable that the incineration and disappearance in one day of nearly 3,000 innocent souls, the injuries of thousands more, and the long-term sickness and death of those who worked at Ground Zero have not been enough to get the full force of the law, transparency, and our own government behind us. But now, for the first time in 12 years, after reviewing the findings, 2 congressmen, Walter Jones and Stephen Lynch, have introduced a bipartisan resolution urging President Obama to make public the 28 pages, which were almost entirely blacked out when the panel issued its final report in December of 2002. In our long journey for justice, we, the families and survivors, have faced many obstacles along the way, but we remain dedicated to passing a bill called the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act, JASTA. This bill has broad bipartisan support in both the Senate and the House, and it is the only legislation that provides Americans with the unambiguous right to hold financiers of terrorism accountable in the United States Court of Law. Once the 28 pages become public, exposing the guilty parties who gave and continue to give financial aid to Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and numerous other terrorist organizations, there will be outrage, and rightfully so. Money is the lifeblood of terrorism, and we must stop the flow of money used to fund terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda. JASTA does not cost the taxpayers a dime, and it is vital to our thwarting future terrorist attacks. Many people believe Our suffering is in the past, and future attacks are diminished. Neither is true. Our loss is for the rest of our lives, and the threat of a future attack is still very real. The time has come to declassify the 28 pages and to codify JASTA. The end of our 12-year struggle for justice will mark the beginning of truth and accountability for us and all Americans. Thank you.
And these families and our nation deserve to have those questions answered. The declassification of the 28 pages is an important step towards answering those questions. And after reviewing the 28 pages, we believe, myself and Walter and Mr. Massey, we believe that they can be declassified without harming U.S. intelligence sources and methods. Indeed, we firmly believe that the information contained therein can be instructive in framing our current anti-terrorism policy going forward. Terrorism remains a real threat.
I'm Walter Jones. I represent the 3rd Congressional District of North Carolina in the United States House of Representatives. I'm pleased today to share some thoughts with you. I have joined Stephen Lynch and Thomas Massey. Stephen Lynch is a congressman from Massachusetts, and Thomas Massey from Kentucky, and myself have joined in a letter to President Obama. We write today to urge you to declassify the 28 redacted pages of the joint inquiry.
He was the love of my life. His parents, siblings, and our 3 children miss him each and every day. He was only 41 years old.
The 28 pages has nothing to do with national security. If it did, I wouldn't be speaking to you today. It does not. It talks about relationships in the international world that we live in and who we can trust and not trust.
These families and our nation experienced a profound and personal loss. There are many questions that remain.
Okay, to introduce our next speaker, we have a tape, and I think it's going to be self-explanatory, but I'll just point out that Matthew Ogden had a chance to talk to Senator Bob Graham a few days ago. If I could have also Terry, could you come up? And Ray, and we can begin the tape as they are coming to the...
into intelligence activities before and after the terrorist attack on September of 2001. How can you have a democracy or a republic and not have sunshine in your government? We had a news conference several months ago, and we brought the families in who have lost loved ones. If the President could just see the pain in the eyes and the words of those family members, then hopefully he would declassify these 28 pages.
Here is a picture of my husband, Tom.